Everyone. Oh, come on, you can do better than that. Good morning, everyone. Better. At least I get to feel comfortable because your faces are smiling. My name is Rufara Chikwakwata, and I'll be moderating the very first panel for today. Welcome to those joining us virtually. We hope you're going to enjoy this session as much as those who are here physically. So, before I call up our panelists, I'm just going to give a brief overview of the session that we're about to unpack. And it is titled Inside Africa's Spyware Boom, Unpacking the Tools, Tactics, and Targets. So, in recent years, we have witnessed a profound and a quiet shift across the digital landscape of Africa, where we see spyware technologies, which were once the domain of high level state to state intelligence. I mean, let's talk about the movies that we've watched. Anyone who has ever watched Born Identity, Jason Bourne? Anyone? Hands? Enemy of the State, Mission Impossible, things like that. We've been seeing that in movies. But coming to this discussion today, we are noticing that these spyware technologies have become a readily available and rapidly spreading tool of control and surveillance. And this proliferation has fundamentally reshaped the conversations that we're going to have today. Conversations around privacy, around accountability, and human rights on all continents. And the rise of invasive stealth hacking programs such as Pegasus and similar products from various international firms represents an intense challenge to democratic governance. This technology is not merely a tool for legitimate law enforcement, it has become a mechanism for political control and often deployed without oversight or due process. And let me take you to the GTEx Africa that was held in April 2025 this year, where Kaspersky revealed the dynamics of cyber threats in the African region, noting a 14% increase in spyware threats directed to African countries. And among those countries, we have Kenya, South Africa, Morocco, and even Nigeria um, being vulnerable and being the most attacked African countries. And from 2023 to 2024, the African businesses have been targeted by web threats, on device threats, and attacks aiming to steal data. So, more about this information can be found on Kaspersky's new report online. So, ladies and gentlemen, spyware is not a theoretical threat, it is a living reality. We are living it right now. And from government sanctioned surveillance to exploitation by private sector entities, spyware is being deployed. Whether we want to acknowledge it or not, it is being deployed. And it is deployed often without proper oversight and due process. And it allows operators remote, often complete and unrestricted access to all computers, where we are even seeing smartphones being 24-hour surveillance tools. And the consequences are severe, and they pose significant threat to freedom of expression, to democracy, to journalism, and to human rights. So, to help me in digging deeper into this complex ecosystem that we have just talked about, we have a distinguished group of panelists, which I'm going to introduce just now. They work at the intersection of law, of technology, activism, journalism, and intelligence. So please join me in welcoming Dorothy Mukasa. Dorothy is the convener of this privacy symposium. She's the executive director of Unwanted Witness. She's also a trailblazing African leader in the field of digital rights. Dorothy is a researcher, policy advocate, and digital rights advocate, whose work has seen us gathering here today, even during this week, to shape continental debates of Africa's digital transformation. Welcome, Dorothy. Please take a seat. I'm going to introduce our next panelist as well. Benga Shosan. He's the executive director of Paradigm Initiatives in Nigeria, which is a non-profit organization that works to connect underserved young Africans with digital opportunities and ensures the protection of their online rights. Welcome, Benga. I'll move on to introduce Kehinde Adeboyega. He's the executive director of Human Rights Journalists Network in Nigeria, where he leads initiatives that advance press freedom, digital rights, and civic accountability. Welcome, Kinde. I'll move on to introduce our virtual panelists. Forgive me, I've got 7 panelists, and they all deserve a proper introduction, hey? So, virtually, joining us is Itumeleng Sedia Dia. She's a South African intelligence analyst, academic researcher, AI trainer, and cultural localization specialist whose work spans across international security, digital governance, compliance, and the politics of surveillance. Welcome into Milang. Can you please confirm if you can hear us with the hi to the audience? Okay, I'm sure she'll be joining us. I'll move on to the next panelist. We have Naomi Mweli Kilungu, a lecturer at Daystar University in Kenya. She's a consultant, interdisciplinary researcher. She's an academic and trainer specializing in the peace and artificial intelligence, conflict economics, child protection in war zones, and the decolonization and localization of digital peace building. Help me welcome Naomi. Naomi, please can you confirm she can hear us by just saying hi to the audience? Okay, I think they'll be joining us soon. We have also Helen Olafsdottir. She's a security peace building and development specialist who has worked for the United Nations. And lately, she has been working in Somalia on people centered security and security sector oversight, supporting both the UNDP and IOM. Let us welcome Helen. Helen, if you could please confirm that you can hear us with the hi to the audience. Yes, we can hear you. Thank you, Helen. Lastly, we have Madalitso Mwenda. He is a criminal investigations officer working under a legal and governance watchdog Independent Complaints Commission, ICC, in Malawi, where he tackles criminal and cybersecurity cases. He's also a member of the African Criminal Justice Network, a network that champions criminal justice in Africa. Welcome, Madalito. If you can please confirm if you can hear us by greeting the audience. Okay, I'm sure they'll join us as we go. So, welcome to the panel, lady and gentlemen. I'd like to start with an icebreaker question to all of you. What was your first reaction the moment you learned how powerful modern spyware really is? I'll start with you, Dorothy.
My first reaction was a bit scary, knowing how intrusive spyware is, but also the magnitude, the scale of intrusion gets everybody scared, especially if you're in the human rights arena. Uh, because just reflect in the traditional way of spying, where somebody had to be tracked physically and also somehow government stages a person to be moving along with you and know your movements, know your location, your networks. That was a bit tedious and also not as intrusive, even when it was unlawfully done sometimes, but not as intrusive as spyware. Spyware is very extremely intrusive, but also the magnitude, the scale at which it can target unintended individuals. So it's scary.
Thank you, Dorothy. As we can see, she's already unpacking everything that we need to know about spyware, hey, the characteristics of spyware. And thank you so much for that. Over to you, Benga.
Yeah, thanks. My first reaction was, why me? Why not? Why waste your resources on me? Why not focus on the terrorists and the criminals? If you have something that's powerful, don't waste it on me. Get your job done and focus on the criminals.
That's a good one. So bigger things is unimportant enough. Over to you, Kende.
And I will be speaking for the journalists that have to hold government accountable. And imagine doing a story, you're still working on story, but the DSS in Abuja is inviting you for a meeting. That's scary. And also, it puts a lot of security threat to your family, your loved one, just because you are trying to do your work. And that's how powerful. And because it also has the capacity to not just take control of your devices. You could listen to your conversation, your private conversations that could be used against you,
Yes.
and all that. And also because you're still developing a story, and it's the trauma and the experience. And we've seen a lot of cases where journalists are tracked to their homes and they feel unsafe, and a lot of them are saying, is this worth it? Should I find another job? Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Already we can see the fear surrounding people being surveilled and being monitored. I'd like to move on to you, Helen, joining us online, to respond to the question, what was your first reaction to the moment you learned how powerful modern spyware really is? Over to you, Helen. So we move towards the Thank you very much, Helen. Apologies. I'll just ask my panelists to move a few centimeters. That's it. That's it. So we can balance the stage. Thank you very much for your submissions, Helen. I don't know if Intumeleng has joined. Probably she can also provide her answer to the question. If not, Naomi, are you there? Or Madalito? Okay, so I guess we can move on with a partner. I'm coming back to you, Dorothy, as we try to establish the landscape and impact of spyware attacks. So, across Africa, spyware often operates in the shadows. From your vantage point, engaging with courts, with regulators, and communities, what do you see as the biggest misunderstanding about how spyware actually affects ordinary people's rights and daily lives?
I'll begin with an incident just to demonstrate how it impacts, but also for people to understand the magnitude of spyware. We've just done a research this year looking at spyware and surveillance in East and Southern Africa at Unwanted Witness. And one of the stories that came out keeps ringing in my mind whenever we talk about spyware is that there was this journalist who's an investigative journalist in one of the countries. This guy does his work normally, but somehow because owns an iPhone, he got notification that he was being bugged. His phone was being bugged. Now, he was advantaged that he had an iPhone and he could get such notification. So, as you try to seek for security remedies, uh, presumably the same people that were trying to bug his phone attacked him physically. So he was going back home, and then he got these guys attacking his car. He had his head hit hard with the stones, and then he had to be hospitalized. But during the same process, he also realized that when he sought for security remedies, so when forensic audit was being done, it was also realized that his wife's phone was also being spied on. So that shows the magnitude of spyware. So you can imagine that trauma. He has just talked about the trauma. You can imagine the trauma that this person has gone through, knowing that he's not safe in his own country, knowing that his noble job is causing him trouble as a citizen, but also not only himself, but the family, the relatives, the children, the wife, but also the relatives, the network. So the extent and the damage that spyware causes is often misunderstood. Somebody thinks, whoever conducts spyware thinks that they're targeting someone, but actually they're affecting the entire network and the family of that single person, and also their mental well-being. So the impacts that go through these individuals, but also we've also had another story, and this time it's a politician that he does not, there are certain spaces within his household that he does not go through. He no longer settles in those places because he fears they are watching him. So it causes trauma to individuals, it causes trauma to families, but it also, if somebody is not very resilient or even doesn't have support, then they'll give up on their job. So they withdraw from practicing journalism. You withdraw from seeking accountability as civil society actor. You withdraw from contesting as a politician because you fear that somebody your life is in danger. But it also affects democracy. If dissenting voices are really curtailed, then the democratic tenets will definitely be shut down. So it affects democracy as well as the economic growth of any country. Just imagine how many people would give up on their jobs simply because they fear to be surveilled on. Okay, simply because they know that they're not safe at the workplaces. Okay, so the impact is huge. It goes from individual, community, but also at the nation level.
Okay, thank you, Dorothy. Your points about the lack of understanding of how intrusive spyware really is are very critical to this discussion. Benga, building on to Dorothy's submissions, I understand Paradigm Initiatives. They works directly with young Africans, many of whom are coming online for the first time. So, how do you see spyware and covert surveillance shaping next generation's relationship with the internet, with trust, creativity, activism, and even their willingness to participate online?
Thank you. So one of the things that surveillance, illegal surveillance, and deployment of spyware does is that it erodes the fundamental trust that people have in the online space and in governments. Now, unfortunately, trust is very much at the center of the digital economy. So, if you are engaging in surveillance, particularly of a generation that is a digital generation, what that does, it's the same thing you're doing when you say, let's have lunch. You invite everyone to the table and you poison the food. The first person who tastes the food and dies is a signal to the other people. So when you're saying that we're building a digital economy, which basically means that we want more people to come online, we've got about 750 million Africans online right now. We want to grow that number almost twice in the next few years. But at the same time, we're creating problems in terms of surveillance. And the challenge with deploying spyware is that it's not cheap. So every time that spyware investment in illegal surveillance is happening, you're literally foregoing something that we need for something that we, honest, in most cases, don't need. And I say this because Paradigm Initiative conducted a study last year across the different regions of the continent. And what we found was that in most cases, the rationale is that there's terrorism, that's number one. Number two is public security, safety, and all that. And because of that, we're putting this percentage of our annual budget into spyware, into surveillance equipment. But what we've seen is that over the last 7 years, the more countries invest in this equipment, the more they have security problems.
Yeah.
So there is a direct correlation. I'm not talking about causation here. There is a direct correlation between increase in investment in surveillance, illegal surveillance particularly, and spyware, and increase in insecurity. And the challenge is that the premise is therefore faulty. So when you're saying to a younger generation that we want you to be innovative. And we did have this conversation. I mean, unfortunately, he's late now, but a former president and a few of us were on the same panel at the World Economic Forum on Africa a few years ago. And he was, lashing out at young Africans and saying, why are you not like Bill Gates? All you want to do is abuse your president, like they don't need to be abused. All you want to do is abuse your president and call out people. Why don't you become like Bill Gates and become rich? And it was like, you guys are too focused on irrelevant things. And, where are Africa's Bill Gates? And I responded to him. I said, Africa's Bill Gates, and this is a president of a Southern African country. And I said to him pointedly, as a well-raised African man, with due respect, sir, all of the potential Bill Gates in your country, you've sent them to jail. Because unfortunately, some of them were walking around crypto. And the assumption was that crypto was being used for supporting protests. And this was this is literally a dictator, a democratic dictator who sends some people to jail. And so when you send them to jail, what you're basically saying is that this innovation is a crime. So this is the message we send to young people when we're making them watch their backs. Listen, Africa missed the first, second, and third industrial revolution. This is the fourth. We have no business shutting down the internet and investing in illegal surveillance. What we should be focusing on is maximizing the benefits of the digital economy. And there's no way to do that if we keep eroding trust. Not only do we do surveillance, we kill these young people when they go on the streets. We can't keep doing that and expect to benefit from them in the digital economy. And the irony, by the way, is when they then attract investment, the government is quick to say, countries are guilty of this. And I can mention the top 4 countries: Nigeria, Egypt, Kenya, and South Africa, because the investments flow into those countries. And then the government say, we are very good for business because our young people have become unicorns. Excuse me, they became unicorns in spite of your negative policies and in spite of your polluted lunch that you invited them to.
Yes, thank you, Venga. You do agree with me that there's a lot of passion that's here on the stage, right? Thank you so much for those submissions, and it really does paint a troubling picture when we're looking at a generation that is already starting with mistrust, and already looking at what you've shared with us, that there are actually more better issues in Africa that we can invest in. So yeah, thank you for that. I'd like to move on to Intumeling. I'm not sure if she has joined. I just need to check. Intumeling, are you with us? Okay. I'll come back to you, Kainde. Now, Kainde, let's shift the focus to the victims and the early warning signs. You work closely with newsrooms, right? You mentioned a bit about journalists and so forth. So, across Africa, journalists often become the earliest targets or earliest detectors of spyware operations. From your view, Akinde, um, working closely with newsrooms and rights defenders, what subtle early signals do you think societies should pay attention to before a surveillance crisis becomes visible?
Yeah, but I also want to establish that we know why journalists are the first target, like, because we want to hold government accountable, and sadly, it's sad that that kind of huge investment. Because the first time I just heard about spyware in investment as far back as 2019, military investing a lot, and we had a lot of terrorism attack. Oh, they will catch the bad guys, but unfortunately, they are catching the good guys, and they are putting them in jail. So one of the first signal you see is. You get a lot of phishing emails. Like, it's almost like someone is listening to your conversation, and we see that a lot. Like, you expecting an email from someone, and it looks so genuine. Imagine your workload of trying to do your work, and you have to deal with, is this fake news? Is this good news? Like, trying to sieve through your emails. Look, where is this coming from? Is this from the, like, imagine having to go, when you check your email, you have to first check the email address. Where is this coming from? Is this really coming from who I'm expecting it from? And when you have first checked that, you are not checking if the content of that email have not been compromised. Like, is this looking like the email that they will send to me? So imagine the trauma of trying to do your work, and the first thing you have to do is check the email or the message that you are receiving, and you've seen even the source is compromised, and that you've seen issues where the sources, and without the source, journalism is dead. The media is dead. We have no business in the news. Imagine the source say, oh, sorry, I can't give you information anymore. Because that means we can't hold government accountable. That means the democracy that we try to say we are protecting or building is just in shambles. So the sources are dying off because they are afraid for their life. Because the journalist is not safe. Who is going to protect? And unfortunately, we seem to have a protection around sources and all that. And those things are not working. And they tell you that in the disguise of national security, every other expression, every other human right is suspended. Even a former president said this in a meeting of lawyers, and everybody's were clapping for him. Like, the people that are supposed to hold in account, it's that bad. So you see a lot of these signs. You see unusual people around your offices, even people that don't know where you live. We've seen cases where journalists reported a news, and before you know it, someone is knocking at their door, and their home addresses are not publicly anywhere. And you see, it's so sad. And I will have to say this, that because they tell us we are bad marketing Africa, but these are the reality. We know, we've heard about the news how Nigeria got to the table of the US Assembly, and we are talking about us. And as if that is not embarrassing enough, we have a lot of kidnapping in the same week. Within 72 hours, I think even the numbers have increased. I think we are supposed to even save ourselves that embarrassment and say, oh, we are doing something about it. But we're seeing states that usually we don't have this kind of kidnapping. So what I'm saying that it's easier to see this spyware attack journalists, track human rights defenders, track civil actors, but hard, unfortunately, to track people that even killing the generals. It's hard to track people that are attacking just people worshiping in their church. So it's so unfortunate. So the signals are there, but it's also challenging that every time while you are trying to do your work, you have to watch out for the signals too. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much, Kenda. Excellent points on the early signals, and really understanding the signals is indeed vital for us to understand what spyware attacks are all about. And as well, I like what you mentioned about when you brought up the issues of our sources being monitored, and also being in danger, actually, to the extent that as journalists you actually no longer have reliable sources giving you information, and in the end it's coming out to a world where we are thwarting freedom of expression and democracy, and so forth. Thank you very much, Geinde. If I'd like to check if Madalitso is online, if she's with us, so that we can move on. Sorry, if he is with us. Unfortunately, I think he hasn't been able to join. So I'd like to move on to talk about power, legitimacy, and vulnerability of these spyware attacks. And I'll move on to you, Helen, who's joining us virtually. With your experience in security oversight, when oversight is weak and fragile, especially in conflict affected environments and security institutions, what do you see, Helen, as the biggest risk when spyware becomes embedded in these systems? And does it deepen insecurity, entrench power, or reshape the relationship between citizens and states in ways we are not fully acknowledging right now?
This dynamics extraordinary, and it's simply enough to citizens. Security Act is now being and the new comes and displays against this, right? This is of the vice universe. So it's like with a lot of people in safety and security. And because these systems are private, where that completely sense, digital oversight, or strong data protection. Whereas the government doesn't just land on sort of secure international institution driven, based in a web with private use, genetics, you make those things. By the way, I think it shapes it because it's meant for us to say relationship it's very important, especially on something like marginalized people, women, hospitals. That's not discussed in the very terms. And says well in the very communication, the need for yes, how about interventions? And we can define security needs. It moves us where like once human security. If I may just have really the end. Just think about where we're today. In fact, the United States, but it's own transformation. This is what we have to this is what we see as stewardship in power, which is driven by what maybe some of you may know this analysis on contact and feudalism. It's very interesting because he's starting to talk about where cloud platforms, big data, and digital infrastructure is almost like a man here is also we are surrendering control over our data in return for access to those organizational services. But we risk losing autonomy and democratic control and privacy. So this massive surveillance is one of the most pernicious instruments in this environment. And once it's embedded into data security systems, especially in to shift the balance of power in reverse of the networks and data.
Thank you, Helen. I also just want to follow up on you. Let's look at a lot of surveillance tools enter countries in quietly through security. You are in security. They enter through security partnerships, procurement deals, and crisis-driven decision making. What should be the first red flags citizens or civil society or even policymakers to look for when spyware is starting to influence how security sector functions?
Yeah, it's quiet because it's often through bilateral security assistance, right? So it can be like security assistance, crisis procurement. It's kind of opaque partnerships. So red flags, I would say, number one, you may see certain shifts in security sector procurement, or tech imports. So especially this happens often during crisis moments where you have surveillance tools are introduced during elections, protests, periods of instability. So that's not coincidental. Another red flag would be, for example, lack of transparency on certain MOUs, where there are technical assistance agreements between governments. In some countries that I worked in, I've heard of MOUs being signed with foreign partners. Some of them win some sort of cyber capabilities, but there's no democratic oversight. So who scrutinizes these agreements? Another red flag, I would say, is emerging digital surveillance capacity without matching investment in data protection. So if a police force or intelligence unit are suddenly acquiring kind of a new surveillance capabilities, but there's no talk of privacy safeguards, internal audits, or civilian complaints mechanisms, that's a huge red flag. And that's happening around the continent, and in where I come from, in Iceland, in Europe, this is happening. New patterns of arrests are also really interesting to watch. Intimidation, digital threats, targeting. We mentioned journalists were mentioned before on the panel, activists, minority voices. So when you use spyware, it's the effects will obviously, that the first ones to be hit are those speaking truth to power. And then maybe just to mention, lastly, silence or ambiguity from regulatory institutions, right? Because if ministries of communication, justice, or interior are evasive on digital surveillance, and the law is vague or not there really, or is under review, sometimes these are deliberate tactics, so that the legal ambiguity enables in the vacuum the spyware to flourish. So ultimately, the red flags are not just technical, they are political. Yeah. So we must watch who's benefiting from the surveillance, who is being silenced, and whose security increases as a result. So that I would say those are the biggest kind of red flags. And I think we should all think about the chilling. My last point is the global dimension again. And it's been so starkly visible right now in the war on Gaza. Gaza is a chilling proof that spyware and AI are being developed in context of mass violence, test bedding in new architectures of war, occupation and control. So if these systems are becoming normalized and then exported to conflict affected states with poor oversight, whether it's Africa, Middle East, or elsewhere, we risk accelerating a global drift towards authoritarian control and ethnic profiling, state-sponsored repression, and complete impunity. So what's happening in Gaza today should also, could become a blueprint for security sectors and oppression around the world. So we've got to be awake against what's happening in real time right now in the context of the Gaza conflict. Thank you so much.
I understand you have a flight to catch later on. Thank you for joining in, and do have a safe trip.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I want to come to Naomi. I understand Naomi has joined us. Naomi, please confirm if you can hear me.
Hello.
I want us to focus on the most fragile concepts, Naomi. When spyware enters fragile or conflict-affected environments, how do you of safety and peace building especially for groups like refugees, women, and children who already move through systems of surveillance and vulnerability?
Thank you so much. And I'm sorry, I've been saying that the volume is quite low, and I've been trying to change my gadgets to hear you completely. But I'll go on now. First of all, I'm the founder of AI for Peace Africa, which is based in Nairobi, and what we do research around tech, peace tech, in areas like early warning and other systems that are currently and will be used in future in the context of fragile states in Africa. We do also capacity building, and also we build models that are more so African and context based in terms of conflict prevention and also peace building. And coming to your question, we've seen that has already been happening, and spyware has basically been used in all these contexts, fragile context in Africa, and it's one of the stimulators or amplifiers, surveillances and surveillances and intrusion into governments and into structures, into social structures of different states has been seen across the continent, and this has amplified the situation in fragile states. I can say it is one of the amplifiers, not majorly, but what we have seen is that data is not explicitly given, especially by state agencies, when there is intrusion, because of aspects of trust and legitimacy. So, if, for instance, African Union is one of organizations that we are working with, and even now I'm in a summit that we are doing a roundtable conversations around security and peace. And one of the issues that has come up and that is not quite put out there is that we have interference, we have intrusion, we have surveillances over these agencies, and this has a lot to do with decision making, because the parties and the external interests that propose these kinds of activities have interest in terms of quote unquote hegemony, kind of interest, imperialistic kind, and other form is of opposition, and basically using militia groups. And currently we've seen a rise of militia groups and other belligerents being users and intruders of government systems and peace processes, and in agencies that deal with peace building. And that one erodes trust of networks of these agencies. Secondly, exposing the safe spaces of women and children, and especially when we talk about safe spaces and data, because when we look at what these agencies do, they collect a lot of data that belongs to women and other victims of war, and you will see political opponents or critics that are seeking asylum, and their data has been collected. And we've seen some of these people being killed in countries of asylum, especially in Kenya. They're running from Rwanda, from DRC, and they'll be found in their houses, killed. So this kind of surveillance that happens in the systems, because these people have been tracked, how they have escaped, their escape routes, and so forth. So it's key to understand that surveillance and weaponization that has been happening against, especially the marginalized women and children that are running for protection. So it's very key to understand there are implications there are major implications when it comes to peace building and post-conflict construction in us.
Answer in brief the last panel of questions that we just have so that we come to a close. I'll start with you, Dorothy. We are watching African governments embrace digital transformation while simultaneously expanding their surveillance capacities. In your view, what is the most urgent shift, legal or be it political or cultural, that must happen if we are to prevent spyware from becoming a normalized tool of governance on the continent?
Thank you. Briefly, from the conversation, it's clear that governments are not willing, African governments are not willing to recede on the use of spyware. More so that you see that trends, political trends on the continent where governments want to stay longer in power and also embracing technology as that tool, spyware as a tool that can enable their longevity in power. So I think as citizens we have a responsibility, we have a responsibility to act and act faster, right? We need to collaboration, something that was talked about, both cross-national collaborations and in continental collaborations. Learn from one another, support one another to be able to, with knowledge, with tools, to be able to build that resilience for our citizens as we navigate the murky waters and push out the elephant in the room, okay? Public awareness is also very important. We can't do it alone. If it's civil society, if it's academia, you can't do it alone. We need the citizens, we need the communities, we need the societies that we live in. How do we make them understand that this is not for a professional journalist, but you're also in danger? But how can you join into the struggle to be able to remedy and support yourselves? Import controls where need be, but also litigation is very important. We know it's very hard in our local countries, but can we explore regional litigation actions that we can support? We can be able to have precedences and also use these as advocacy tools to be able to flag, raise a red flag in our respective countries. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dorothy. I'm coming to you, Benga. Let's talk about disrupting the ecosystem a little bit, in brief. So across the continent, spyware does thrive in environments with weak transparency and strong centralized power. So from your work in the digital rights and inclusion, what do you think African civil society is still not doing enough to disrupt the ecosystem? And what bold action do you believe is long overdue?
Thank you. So three things I believe we need to do better. Number one is to document. Many of these things, we have anecdotal evidence many times, but a few times when we talk about the impact, the question I ask is, did we document it? I'll give you a very practical example. We knew what was going to happen in Tanzania. We knew this was going to happen. I mean, let's not pretend. We knew what's going to happen. So in advance, we had conversations with individuals in the country and said, listen, there will be repression. Use your digital tools to record and do keep the evidence. So when the state was denying, oh, nobody was killed and all that, of course we knew hundreds were killed. So when we saw eventually that over 1,000 people were killed, there was proof of that. And the reason why you need to have proof is that the only way to stop a bully is to look them in the eye and say, I know what you did. You're not a bully, don't worry. I know what you did, and I'm going to stop you from doing it again. So we need to keep records, number one. Number two is we need to protect ourselves. Let's face it. People who are investing in this have one key interest: to stay in power. Even though, unfortunately, they stay so much in power, they give democracy a bad name. I mean, see what just happened in Guinea-Bissau yesterday. I mean, it's just a shame people are giving democracy a bad name, but we need to protect ourselves. Paradigm Initiative invested over the last few years in what we call AYETA, AYETA.Africa. AYETA is a Yoruba word that means bulletproof. So if someone shoots at you, you're fine, you won't die. So when these tools come towards attacking you, you can be safe as a journalist, as an activist, proactive action. And I was giving a thumbs up to Dorothy earlier to say the third action I believe we need to take, test the laws, go to court. In Nigeria, they say this at times to ridicule you. When something has gone wrong, they say, okay, go to court, right? But I've learned the power of going to court. Even when you don't win the case, you spotlight the issue for journalists to talk a bit more about and for society. So we need more people. The reason why they call, one of the judges called us busybodies for one of the surveillance cases we were, taken in one of our countries of operations. And the reason why they say that is because there are only a few civil society organizations that are going to court. We need more people so that those few are not demonized. We need to document, we need to protect ourselves, and let's go to court.
Thank you, Benga. You are really geared for this, huh? And Kainde, coming to an end, as you close this for us, you've used storytelling, film, and civic networks to expose digital repression. In a continent where spyware often works in the shadows, what role do creative mediums like documentaries, public narratives, or grassroots storytelling play in shifting public perception and building resistance against covert surveillance?
Thank you so much for that. Before I quickly have to address that, we need to pay attention to this in our laws and whatever we do. Instead of privacy by design, what we presently have is surveillance by design. Pay attention to the laws. They may not openly tell you, oh, we are making a law around digital rights. Look at the laws, look at the policy. It could be even in starting a school. They are already written, and when government are already shaking hands with technological partners, they are already saying that you need to share data freely with us. Pay attention. I'm moving quickly to your question. The Paradigm Initiative have done so wonderfully well in using film to like 4 short films, because sincerely sometimes the issue that we talk about here, especially even when I talk to journalists, when I tell them you are under surveillance, it looks complex, it looks above their head and all those. But when they look at a film and they can relate to the context of those films. And that is why we need to invest in films the way we are investing into workshops to change behavior. We need to invest into films to tell these stories. You can see how films can start conversations. You don't need to start saying, do this, do that. They'll see themselves in it. That is the power of films. Whether you are talking to young people, whether you are talking to adults that believe that it's the young people that are causing the problem for the world, or you're talking to young people that think it's the adults that are causing the problem for the world. But the moment you fix in those issues into very strong narrative in films and you are shaping their thoughts, they begin to take those issues personally and become advocates, and not just be on this panel and say, oh, surveillance is a serious issue. We need more advocates. We need more people to talk, because especially in an era where there is a major funding cut, the funding for advocacy is reducing. We need the civilians on the street to be aware that surveillance is aware, and so that we are not burned out, because there is a lot of burnout, and in an era where we are seeing more authoritarian government. Initially, America used to be like, assumedly, a model for democracy. We know what it is now, and we know where funding. We now have even America is not just putting out a policy for themselves. They are telling the world what they should do. They should invest more in warfare. And what that means also, invest more in surveillance. And we are not saying surveillance is totally bad, but unlawful surveillance. That means you are going to, even in any form of policy, you need to look, I would say, shine your eye. You need to look very well. And conclusively, And the way we can adopt more people to be able to look very well is when we use storytelling, animation, short films, feature-length film. Let's invest whatever we can as we're investing in other cultural and acting to be able to tell this story. And it makes the work easy for every one of us. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for a powerful closing statement. Would like to open this up to the floor for any questions. I can only take 2 questions. So if you've got a burning questions, you need to lift your hand quite fast.
Great, no questions.
Oh yeah, I take it there are no questions. Thank you very much to the panelists for such an engaging discussion and in unpacking our topic. I just want to thank you, Dorothy, Benga, Keinde, Naomi, and Helen, who was left, for sharing your invaluable expertise and perspective on what is arguably one of the most urgent threats to digital rights and democracy on the continent. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.